Hi everyone, I'm Erin Thompson of Everyday Expressions. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to share the new Fall into Autumn collection by Picket Studios for July. I Autumn begins my favorite crafting season of the year, and I love the fall colors and just knowing that right around the corner I'm going to be able to do all of my holiday crafting. But the warm colors of fall are just that it's a fun new time, right after all of the bright, vibrant colors of summer. So I'm really excited to share this with you. I showed several pieces of the new release that actually I decided not to use, but they were so pretty that I left them in the introduction so that you could get a peek at some of the other items that I decided not to use. But in this, I am Copic coloring the new Sweet Autumn Holiday stamp set by Kelly Taylor, designed by Kelly Taylor for Picket Fence Studios. And it's just this really pretty cupcake with a dahlia and some pretty fall flowers on it. Obviously, I wanted to color it up in, warm oranges and yellows. And then I decided that it would be on a chocolate cupcake. And if you follow me, you know that I do okay at Copic coloring, but I'm not the best and I don't claim to be. And to be honest, sometimes I just flat out avoid Copic coloring. But when you have a really pretty stamp like this, I definitely pull out the Copics. And I thought I would be really brave and try to color a chocolate cupcake. So that's where the trick comes in later on. It's actually just a little part of the video, but I wanted you to see how I was brave and maybe push you to take a chance in coloring chocolate, because it's not always easy to get the shadows and the light colors and really get the depth of the chocolate. And so I have a special shading trick for you when we get there. But let's get started. I really sped up the coloring, but you can see the colors that I use as I go. And this dahlia, I decided I definitely wanted it to be both yellows and oranges. And I stayed safe with just yellow flowers and then the green foliage on here. So I began by putting the new stamp in my MISTI and conditioning it with my hand. I always rub new stamps with my hand or a lint-free towel to condition it so I get a nice stamp. And then I'm using Hammermill 100-pound paper. It's pretty much my go-to for coloring now. I do have the Express It paper, but lately I just keep grabbing the Hammermill because it does such a great job. So I stamped my images actually twice with my Picket Fence Studio black ink. And then I always heat set black stamped images before I'm going to Copic color. And that way, and I really leave the heat on it for several seconds without obviously harming the paper. But I want it to really be heat set so that I have a nice clear image when I start coloring. Many times, especially with the light markers, if you don't use a good ink or you haven't heat set it, you'll get a little bit of smearing. So I find when you heat set it, that normally works perfectly and you don't really have any of that smearing. So then you can see I go through the yellows and the oranges coloring all of these flowers, and I do show you all of them before I color, and then each little lid you can see there, just going through the yellows here on the colors. If you aren't sure what colors to use, obviously I went very safe here and I used analogous colors. Yellow and orange together or next to each other on the color wheel. It's always a safe bet using analogous colors. So, and also because you'll see in a moment, I use the Fun Fall Gingham Glossy A2 card fronts. I use that for the background. It was just easy. That's yellow and orange, and obviously the flowers were going to go perfectly with that. So then there you just see me putting the final touches on the middle of the flowers. Definitely wanted the whole fall theme to come through. And then for that reason, I also chose the yellow green colors for all of the leaves. One of the nice things about this stamped image is it's not overly large. And so if you aren't as confident in your coloring abilities, it's really not a large area, and so you can't really mess this up. It's pretty simple. And I usually begin with the lightest color. I put a good base down, so then all of the colors that come afterwards normally blend pretty well together. And I know there's always a big debate. Some people go in different directions. I usually put down the lightest color first and then go kind of up, moving through the colors to the middle colors and then the darkest ones and then back down again. But it just really depends on the image. But I think in this one, I did it the normal safe way, going up to the darkest and then back down to blend. But sometimes I will go back in with the darkest color because I really like that dramatic contrast between the lights and the darks. And sometimes I find when you go up through the colors and then back down again, it actually kind of fades out the nice shadows that you've built up. Okay, so here we're getting to the fun part. We're coloring the chocolate cupcake. So I begin with the base color, just putting it down over the icing and the cake. And I did want to be very conscientious about making sure there was a defined line between the color of the cupcake and the color of the icing. So I left my cupcake a little bit lighter, maybe more like a devil's food cake or a milk chocolate cake. And I wanted the icing to be that really rich, dark chocolate icing. So I'm going through the colors and I went lightest to darkest to really try and figure out where my highlights would be and where the shadows would be. And so I'm going through. That E49 is definitely the darkest so far. Adding that into the shadows, then defining kind of the piped line. And then I go back down through the E77 and blending that and kind of pulling those colors out. The E27, and then I believe I kept it E23, I think. Let's see if we get here. Yes, as the lightest color and blending that all together. So the final trick is I really wanted some real depth and dimension in this. And I know I've seen Sandy Allnock, who's just, a fantastic artist and colorist. I've seen her add in some blue violets to shadows on skin, especially when you're coloring different colors of skin. And she uses a blue violet and will even use a blue violet to shade snow. And so I pulled out a B66, and I will say I saw this somewhere, and I don't remember who I saw it, who added it to browns, and so I apologize. I normally try to give credit, but B66 is definitely the trick for the shading on that dark chocolate icing. If you've never used a blue or a blue violet for kind of switching it up and adding a depth of shadow, I really want to challenge you and encourage you to try it. I was so proud of myself that, it's not something you think of if you don't Copic color all the time, but adding that B66, it may not show up really well in this video, but in person, it just really added a beautiful depth of shading to the chocolate. And just like I've seen Sandy Allnock when she's coloring different skin tones, that blue violet just adds beautiful shadows onto the face and skin tones. And this B66 really made this chocolate, and it gave it like a fudginess, and I just love it. So be bold. Try to use some blue violets or blues when you're shading, And it obviously won't work with every color you're coloring, but I have shaded with blues for shading the green leaves and things like that. Don't think that you always need to go with a gray and that's going to give you the best shadow. This B66 just really brought out a depth and a dimension in that chocolate frosting, and I was thrilled with the results. So there's the trick. It's a little one. It came towards the end, but oh my goodness, it really took that chocolate frosting to another level. So then I just went through the oranges and coloring the cupcake wrapper. Once again, went with orange and kept it safe. And look how pretty that is. I love, love, love this stamp and how it came out. Didn't take too long to color, but oh my goodness, so pretty for fall. So I'm just die cutting the images here. And you'll see that even though I have a magnetic mat, just to be safe, because I've spent all that time Copic coloring, I did tape it down. Many times I don't, but for this, I did not want anything to shift or move. And so I used a little bit of my tape to tape that down. And there we go. We've got our die cut images. So here is the Fun Fall Gingham Glossy A2 cardstock, and I decided to use this one as a background. I knew going into this that's what I was going to do, and that's how I chose those colors. And for my card base, instead of doing a separate panel, I was kind of lazy, and I went right in direct ink to paper with this chocolate brown ink to create a colored cardstock for the background color. Just a nice pretty chocolate. And then I'm adhering my glossy card front. I did trim it down by 1/4 inch on two sides. And then I have a white panel. And I definitely wanted a little bit of interest in the background, so I added some liquid gold paint splatter and also just created a little bit of watercolor with the chocolate brown ink. Now, I have to tell you, I did two things a little bit backwards on this card, and I know I did, so don't judge me. But I really wanted to figure out where I wanted this twine to go on my card. So you see I am adhering the background here, but then I want to know exactly where this twine needs to go. And so I just kind of got ahead of myself, and I went ahead and wrapped it on the card front. But then I take it off because I realized I wanted to do those splatters that I talked about a second ago. So it's one of those things, you know, you want it there, and you start doing it, and then you realize, oh, I'm not ready for that. So I went ahead and put it on because I wanted to know where the position was. But then you'll see in a second I take it back off. And I just added a little bit of repositionable tape to the back of my die cut pieces just to know temporarily where I wanted them to be and to make sure that the twine would work where I wanted it. And here you see, this is where I go ahead and I add it on there and get it tied up, and then you'll see I realize I want the splatter, and I don't want the splatter on the twine, so I remove it, and then I add it back in later. So, you know, the best laid plans, sometimes we just kind of get ahead of ourselves, and that's what happened. So, yep, it's going to be cute. Let's tie the bow. And then let's take it off in a second. So you'll see when I'm ready to add the splatters, I do get my splat box out. I keep it right underneath my desk ready to go. And there we go. There goes the twine. And I definitely want to use the splat box so that I don't get any splatters on my pieces. I just decided, you know, you could leave those on there. You could adhere them and do the splatters over top. But in this instance, I just wanted the splatters in the background. And I do love the water-based splatters from Picket Studios. And I just find myself reaching for all of these more and more often. I didn't have a brown one, so I just created a watercolor by stamping my ink pad and adding some water, and just and I wanted it dark too. I didn't add too much water. You can see it's pretty saturated there. And then just tapped my brush and created that simple. And now I'm using the splat box, and I like to take the little dropper out, and then I just take a dampened paintbrush and stick it right in the bottle to do my splatters. Super easy that way. And then once I'm happy with the splatters, I do, because I'm impatient, I want to heat these up pretty quick and move on. And they do dry pretty quickly, especially because the one was watercolor, and then the other one, the gold splatters dry very quickly. So now I'm putting my twine back on. No big deal. And you'll see, I don't know what it is. I love a good twine. How about you? Do you like twine and string? I find myself using it a lot, especially these twine and kind of these rustic looking ones. In the fall time, I just think they go perfectly with a fall themed card. So you'll probably see a lot of twine in the next couple months. And now I'll just adhere that with the dimensional foam tape. And then I've added foam tape to the back of my die cuts, and I will add those right over top of the twine. There you go. I love that background. It just adds a little bit of interest. Now, here's the other thing I did on this card that was kind of an oops. I often don't think ahead for what sentiment I want to add. And this was definitely an instance of, oops, I should have planned that out a little bit better. But in the end, thank goodness, I didn't mess anything up. But you see, I add all of these elements, and then I'm going to try and decide what sentiment I want to add. And I had planned all along that it would be one of the die cuts. And then as I started just kind of moving the sentiments around, I decided I wanted a warm hello in the bottom right hand corner. So I held my breath, I crossed my fingers, I said a prayer, and I stamped the sentiment. And you know, you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? Well, I had so much foam tape on the back, but yet there were spaces that I was worried that I would not get a clear stamped image. So the safest bet was to put it in the MISTI, and thank goodness I stamped it a couple of times, and I did get a really good stamped image. So, phew, I was able to save it, and I did not mess it up, thank goodness. I just stamped that in the brown ink, and off we went. And there we go. Our card is almost finished. The final embellishment was just to add a few gems. And I picked, I actually like that this gem mix. It had a mix of blues and warm colors. So I like that you can go through and pick out the exact colors you want for that warm kind of addition to this card. And one final tip you'll see here in a moment. I like my bows to stay pretty and nice on the front of the card, so I will either tack it down with a tiny bit of glue, or here I use a tiny bit of tape to hold that in place. And there we go. What do you think? If you have not subscribed, I would love it if you would join me and be notified when I have future videos. And also, don't forget to like. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.